Shalom to the sons and daughters of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and welcome back to another episode of Torah Tuesday. And today's topic is going to be on concubines. Now, once again, I always put this as a claimer that I deal with the law. So when I go in and start to read the first five books of the Bible, which really is, you know, a joyful thing for me to read. But you run over all of these laws that we're just not aware of. And some of the laws that people may agree with, some of the laws people may not agree with. Now, who cares about our decision when the Most High has given us these laws? So it doesn't matter how we feel about them, but these laws are here for the children of Israel to understand and to perform. Okay? So when we're dealing with concubines, yes, we were, as Israelite men, allowed to have concubines. And these concubines, according to the law, were considered our wives. Okay, so can a man have multiple wives? Yes, he can. Yeah, a man can have multiple wives. Now, that's definitely for another topic. But once again, concubines were considered as wives, but on a lower status. Okay, on a lower status. So let me read this definition I found that was pretty interesting. Yeah, that was pretty interesting. And then from there, I'm gonna go into the law. Let me go back. I'm sorry. Let me go back and set this up right. There we go. Right. So this is just coming out of the Smithson Bible Dictionary, and it's pretty simple to understand based upon the topic, and then it gives some examples that I like, which is further down into the article. So it says uh, the difference between wife and concubines was less marked among the Hebrews than among us, owing to the absence of moral stigma. The difference probably lie in the absence of the right of bill of divorce. So here we are dealing with a bill of divorce. Now that's another topic as well that I'm going to get into because that's a pretty good topic for a Torah Tuesday as far as a bill of divorce. But you have to go, a little deep into it and then get further understanding from other elders of what their opinion may be according to a bill of divorce. But so it says the difference probably lie in the absence of the right of a bill of divorce. Interesting, because we know that uh, dealing with our Hebrew sisters, our Israelite sisters, that a bill of divorce is there. But like I said, that's for a different topic. Continuing on, I'm right here. It says, without which the wife could not be. Let me get that word right. And I'm gonna get the definition for you on that word real quick. Let's see. Give me 1 minute. Let me make sure I get the definition for it. Yeah, here we go. Here we go. Yeah, repudiate. Okay. So repudiate means the rejection as having authority or binding force. Okay. The rejection as having no authority. So that's when it says repudiate. It says without which the wife could not be repudiated, meaning the wife cannot be rejected. Okay, meaning the first wife cannot be rejected. Not only that, but concerning a concubine, the wife will always have a higher status than that concubine, as the story with dealing with Abraham, which we'll get into a little bit, when Hagar was a handmaid of Sarah, and then once that situation took place, but Hagar was definitely considered as one of Abraham's concubines. All right. Back into the article, and it says right here it says regarding regarding the children of the wife of the concubine, of the wife and the concubine, there was no such difference as our legacy. Let me get that one right too. Legitimacy implemented, meaning legitimacy, meaning that they were recognized, even though they were the sons or daughters of a concubine. They still uh, was considered within that man's genealogy seed, and they were not like just set apart. No, they were actually part of the legitimacy, and it was implemented in the records. And as we can read here about a lot of the concubines, sons and daughters, and how they was recognized. But the father, which is the man who gave the seed, will distribute what he needs and the authority over that and the structure of that as well. So that's what it's simply saying. It says there was no such difference as other legitimacy implied. The latter were a supplementary family in a former. I'm sorry, watch that. Family to the former. Their names occurred in the patriarchal genealogy. See, their names were occurred in the patriarchal genealogy. Okay, and then they give you a couple of precepts on that. And their position and provisions were depending on the father's will, right there. And then we're going to see that as well as we get more further into it. Um, then it says the state of the concubinage is assumed and provided for by the laws of Moses. A concubine would generally be either, and now it's going to give, this is very important that I like how they name uh, the status of a concubine. Okay, but uh, let me get Genesis on the patriarchal genealogy, and it says the provision. It says the positions and provisions would depend on the father's will. Let's grab that real quick in Genesis that they provide. Matter of fact, here it is here, and they provided this precept. It says, "But unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son, while yet lived, eastward unto the east countries." Now, what it mean by, bring it up again. Where was that? Genesis 25. There you go. So what it means is that at this time, the Most High had talked to Abraham, changed his name, not only changed his name, but just told him that uh, out of all of his kids, he's going to choose Isaac. And Isaac is the one whom he gave the covenant to. So even though Abraham had other wives, which were concubines, and he had Sarah, but this one particular son, of his seed, which was Isaac, he gave the covenant to. And then the other ones, he gave them whatever portion of his inheritance that he had to them, and he sent them away. He didn't want Isaac to be raised around them, so he sent them away. All right, just to put a little headlight on that. So now let's go back. It says the state of a concubinage is assumed and provided for by the law of Moses. So now we're dealing with the law of Moses, which we're dealing with the first 5 books of the Bible. So a concubine is lawful to have for a man. All right. Um, then it says a concubine would generally be either, this is interesting, a Hebrew girl bought of her father. Now, that one is interesting because we have to understand that that same covenant, that same covenant that was given to Abraham, right? Now, as Jacob came along, right? Um, and Jacob had 12. That's, yeah, you got Esau and Jacob, right? But who did the Most High choose? The Most High choose Jacob. And he chose his 12 sons, which was considered the Israelites. So now you have Hebrews and then you have Hebrew Israelites. So there was a lot of Hebrew. Abraham was a Hebrew, right? And we know that the genealogy and the seed of Abraham, right, goes with that child. The man determines what that nationality of that child is. So all of Abraham, which we read, children that he had from the concubines, they are Hebrews. Now it only starts to that covenant starts to cut from the Hebrews, which we are. That's our nationality. That's our nationality, these Hebrews. But then that covenant continues with Jacob and his 12 sons, which we know Jacob's name was changed into Israel. And that's why we say Israelites, because of his 12 sons. So I hope that's clear. So dealing with a Hebrew girl, right, brought of her father. Okay, it's meaning that if he gives this woman and he sells this woman as a servant, there's one thing we also have to keep in mind is that uh, the the year of Jubilee, and we know that the year of Jubilee. Matter of fact, I did a class on that. Just check the archives. That Hebrew servants were to work 6 years, and the seventh year they were to be released. Okay, so we got to understand when it says the Hebrew girl bought of her father, there was a lot of Hebrews until Jacob came on the scene, and Jacob had his 12 sons, which refer into the Israelites. All right. So it says concubine would generally be either a Hebrew girl, it says, and a Gentile captive taken into war. So let's deal with the Hebrew girl first. Let's deal with the Hebrew girl first. And that's in Deuteronomy. Let's get Deuteronomy real quick. Let's just deal with these one, two. I just want to deal with the first two because the other ones are explanatory. And they pretty much, the number three is a foreign slave bought. Okay, then it says Canaanitish woman, bond or free. Now, when you say Canaanitish woman, then just think about Abraham and Ishmael. All right, and his mother was a Canaanite woman because she was out of the land of she was an Egyptian. Okay, so let's just deal with the Hebrew girl. Let's get Deuteronomy. Let's get Deuteronomy chapter 21. 21. No, Exodus. I'm just going to touch on this real quick as far as about the Hebrew girl. Exodus. 21. Exodus 21 and verse 7. And verse 7. Yes. It says, and if a man sell his daughter to be a maid servant, she shall not go out as the men servants do. See, here we are. If a man sells his daughter as a maid servant, so it was basically, when he say sell, he meaning to make, let's say today, make a contract of of a woman that is a servant, and she's there. She's living up what they call live in. They got some people uh, that does live in, and live in meaning that they live on the premises and they maintain the premises. They clean, they cook, they clean, like a maid, but she lives in. So that's how us Hebrews dealing with the law would would uh, would contract our daughters to another Hebrew who may need help at their house, or whatever reason they want to have, a live-in to be there. Okay, so I'm gonna read that again. It says, if a man sells his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go out as a manservant do, because there's differences. I won't get into that. I just want to stick to the concubine part. But I do want to bring out the law dealing with if a man sell, if a Hebrew girl is sold by her father. Verse 21, yeah, 21 and 8. If she please not her master, who have bought her to himself, then he shall let her be redeemed to sell her unto a strange nation. He shall have no power, seeing he have dealt deceitfully with her. Right? Not gonna get into that. I can get into it, but I'm not. I just want to prove this point. Okay. And if he betroths her to his son, he shall deal with her after the manner of a daughter. Okay, now there's a difference. Here in 8, right, he did not uh, have sex with her. Let's make it plain. Right? Didn't have sex with her, he wasn't betrothed to her. And it's saying if he finds no pleasure in her, then he can take that contract and then just pass her on to somebody else who wants it. But it says, but if he betroth, meaning engage, have a relationship, her to his son, he shall deal with her in the matter of a daughter. Okay? As a matter of her daughter. Then it says, verse 10, if he take him not another wife, her food, her raiment, and her duties of marriage shall not diminish, meaning that son, if he takes another wife, right, but he know that she's just a servant, I got her, she belongs to me, my father gave her to me, and now she's my concubine. Okay, now, but it says if he take him another wife, so now if he has her, but then he finds another woman, uh, and marries her and have another wife, right? Then it says that concubine, her food, her raiment, and the duties of marriage shall not diminish. So he must treat her as a second wife. He can put the tears on her. She may not be the number one, but she's definitely, let's say, the number two because of the dowry of the betrothing. I'm sorry, of the betrothing that his father did, which gave her to him. So just wanted to touch on that real quick. All right, let's go back. Let's go back and let's deal with a Gentile captive taken into war. So let's deal with that one. Now, remember, we stand on concubines. Taken into war, let's go to Deuteronomy. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 21. And we're going to start at verse 10. Deuteronomy chapter 21 and verse 10. When thou goest forth to war against thy enemies, and the Lord thy God have delivered them unto thy hands, and thou hast taken them captive, verse 11, and seest among the captives a beautiful woman, and has a desire unto her, that thou wouldest have to her to thy wife. Okay. Now, here it is, to thy wife. Meaning, when he say to thy wife, if she's a captive, that means that once he have her, that is that man's possession. That's why he says his wife, because uh, no other man should be touching her. So if she comes into his house and she's just like a handmaid, okay, if she's a handmaid and she's there to serve and to clean and things like that around the house, right? But if he have sex with her, then she becomes as a status of a wife. Now I say a status because there's different tiers when you're dealing with, multiple wives. But this particular one is a captive of war, and she's of another nation. But the law still stands as far as, when he consummates, then that woman becomes his wife. Okay. So verse 11 reads again, and he seeth among the captives a beautiful woman, and has a desire unto her, that thou wouldest have her to thy wife. Verse 12, then thou shalt bring her home to thy house, see, his possession, and she shall shave her head and pierce her nails. So now here's the status that the Most High is saying. I'm okay with it, but these are the stipulations that has to happen. Shave her hair, cut off her nails. That is to humble her. We know a woman, beauty, quote unquote beauty lies in, her nails, her hair, you know, whatever appearance she may have. But yes, you get the understanding. But the cutting of the hair and the cutting of the nails is to humble her, to let her know that, you're my possession now. All right, verse 13. And she shall put on the raiment, and she shall put the raiment of her captivity off her, and shall remain in thy house, and bewail her father and her mother a full month. So now he's giving her a time to mourn, because we're talking about war. So we're talking about death. So most likely, mother and father, casualties of war. But the law says you must give her a full month to mourn. Verse 13, continuing. And after that, thou shalt go in unto her. That's the key. Thou shalt go in unto her and be her husband, and she shall be thy wife. See, now remember the tears now, because she's of another nation, so she's considered as a concubine. All right, so that's very key. Um, do I want to continue? Yes. Verse 14. And it shall be, if thou have not delight in her, then thou shalt let her go with her will, but thou shalt not sell her at all for money. Thou shalt not make merchandise of her, because thou hast humbled her. You see. So if he find no pleasure in her, right? Remember, that's his possession, right? If he find the will within him and say, you know what, you can go. He's not to take her and sell her to somebody else, and make merchandise of her, because the Most High said, you have humbled her. But remember, she's from another nation, because it says a captive, right? Thy enemies, against thy enemies. So you are to let her go. That's your will, that's your possession, and that's the law. Just let her go. Okay. So let's go back to the article. Let's go back to the article. And that's sort of dealing with the law, dealing with a Gentile captive given in war. All right. Now you deal with the foreign. It says a foreign slave, a foreigner slave bought. Then it says the Canaanitish woman, bond or free. So these four falls under concubine, right? It says the state of a concubinage is assumed and provided for by the laws of Moses. A concubine would generally be either of these four right here. Okay, but let's take it a little further. Let's continue to read on down. Let's see where we can go with this because uh, our forefathers have always had concubines. Dealing with Abraham, dealing with even Jacob. David. David had concubines. We know Solomon had concubines. Okay, so concubines is nothing new. It's lawful. You Dealing with it says the right of the first two were protected by the laws of Moses. Okay, keep that in mind. The first two, right, are protected by the laws of Moses. And then it gives you certain precepts. You can read them on your own spare time. It says, but the third was recognized and the fourth prohibited. Uh, free, Hebrew, free Hebrew women also might become concubines. That is very key. See this? That's what I said earlier. It says free Hebrew women also might become concubines. But we have to remember the law of Jubilee. Must remember the law of Jubilee. Because as a servant, if you have not made her your wife, is to work for you and then the 7th year of release. Continuing on. To size on royalty concubines for his use was probably the intent of Abner. And then it gives you certain scriptures, precepts that you can go and read as well. So found that pretty interesting. So let's go into, we said Abraham had concubines. Let's go into Jacob. Let's see the concubines that Jacob had. Because we know from dealing with Rachel and Leah, they had handmaids, right? And they gave their handmaids to Jacob, which Jacob went into and made them his concubines, and he had children from these concubines. And that was important to understand when it says that that the concubines' children was recognized in the genealogy. Okay. Oh man, I messed up. Shoot. Yeah, I messed up. Hold on. Okay. Well, I don't want to go back to that because I didn't lost the page. But so let's go into Genesis. Let's deal with Jacob and his concubines. Just to kind of put out there that Jacob also had concubines as well. Genesis chapter 21. Genesis chapter 21, 35 and verse 21. And Israel sojourned and spreaded his tents beyond the towers of Eber. Verse 22. And it came to pass, when Israel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and laid with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. I want to backtrack. I really don't want to get into Jacob's wives, like Bilhah was one of his wives. But I brought this out to make a point where it says that Jacob, Bilhah, his father's concubine. Okay. Now, I do want to get into the law of what Reuben did. Okay, I do want to get into that. And because I'm also going to bring out what Absalom did too to David's concubines. Now, remember, I'm trying to center this thing around concubines and how lawful it is. But I just want to bring out certain scenarios and certain examples on how our forefathers did have. But the law in dealing with concubines. Okay, now, so I'm gonna read this again. Verse Genesis chapter 35 and verse 22. It said, and it came to pass when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Right, and we know what happened to Reuben. Reuben was the firstborn of Jacob, but the birthright was taken away from him because of this heinous act that he did according to the law. Okay, so let's get that law real quick. Let's get that law. Leviticus chapter 18. I'm going to get right to the point. Leviticus chapter 18 and verse 5 through 8. Verse 5. Ye shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, which if a man do, he shall live in them. I am the Lord. Verse 6. None of you shall approach to any that is near of kin to him, to uncover their nakedness. I am the Lord your God. So, near kin, we understand that. Your kinfolks, period. Now, in the book of Leviticus chapter 18, it gives you and it breaks down and it continues on about the sister-in-law, the uncles. It gives you the whole thing about being moral laws, right? In not having consent or sexual consent with your kin, next to kin. The book of Leviticus chapter 18 does. But here I'm jumping to the point. So it says, verse 6, it says, none of you shall approach to any that is near of kin to him, to uncover their nakedness. I am the Lord. Verse 7. The nakedness of thy father, or the nakedness of thy mother, thou shalt not uncover. She is thy mother. Thou shalt not uncover the nakedness of uncover her nakedness. Okay. Now, verse 8, the nakedness of thy father's wife. How about that? It says, the nakedness of thy father's wife shalt thou not uncover. It is thy father's nakedness. That is what Reuben did. Okay, that's what Reuben did. Just wanted to bring that out. Okay, then I'm going to continue on just to read one more. I recommend you go read it for yourself. I actually went over this law as well at one of Torah Tuesday's topics. So it says, the nakedness of thy father's wife thou shalt not uncover. It is thy father's nakedness. Just to read one more. The nakedness of thy sister. Listen, the daughter of thy father, or the daughter of thy mother, whether she be born at home or born abroad, even their nakedness thou shalt not uncover. Not uncover. I would like to get into it a little bit more, but like I said, I did a lesson on this already. But real quick, when it says the daughter, it says daughter of thy father, so we understand that, listen, the daughter of thy mother. It may be a previous marriage where the father has a son and the mother has a daughter. They come together and marry, so they become sisters and brothers. Them two, even though they're not have the same father, they are not to consummate. They're not to have sex. It says the nakedness, uncover their nakedness. So that's a law. They cannot come together, period. Because number one, it says it is the nakedness of thy father and it is the nakedness of thy mother dealing with those children. So don't want to get too much off course. So just wanted to bring that out as far as what Reuben did, and the reason why I brought that out in Genesis chapter 35. 35 and verse, I'm going to go down to 22 because it went straight to the point. verse 22. And it came to pass, when Israel dwelt in that land, that Reuben went and laid with Bilhah, his father's wife, his father's concubine, and Israel heard it. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. All right. Let's get into David. Let's get into David. We know David and Solomon had a whole lot of concubines to a point where that was pretty much their downfall. Pretty much their downfall. They start dealing with other women, of other nations, and the Most High tells you in Deuteronomy chapter 7, that they would turn their hearts away from you. So let me see if this is the one I want. 13. Second Samuel chapter 5 and verse 13. Now we're dealing with David. It says, and David took him more concubines and wives out of Jerusalem after he was come from Hebron, and he were yet sons and daughters. And there was yet sons and daughters born of David. So here we are, David. Now we know King David, he had women of other nations, but guess what? They're still Israelites. Actually, I'm sorry, they're still Hebrews. I'm sorry, because we don't deal with Israelites until we get to Jacob. So they're still Hebrews. But he had what? Sons and daughters from his concubines and his wives. Okay. All right. I want to stay in 2 Samuel, and I'm going to get 15. 2 Samuel chapter 15. And I'm going to read verse 16. Verse 16 real quick. So now I'm jumping ahead now. Still dealing with David and his concubines, because he said he had concubines and he had sons and daughters. And now I'm just jumping ahead because still dealing with concubines of what Absalom did and shamed David, right? Which came in, and we already read the law, because Absalom and David was at odds with one another, and David had to flee. So 15 and verse 16. So David was fleeing out of Jerusalem, but this is what he did. Verse 16. And the king went forth, and all his household after him. And the king left 10 women, which were concubines, to keep his house. Okay. Just want to bring out the point that David had concubines. I'm going to go to verse 16. Verse 16 and verse 21. Now, I'm going to have to get this name because I chop up the names all the time. Y'all forgive me. Ahithophel, and pronounce it. And Ahithophel said unto Absalom, go in unto thy father's concubines, which he hath left to keep the house, and all of Israel shall hear that thou art abhorred of thy father. Then shall the hand of all that are with thee be strong. Okay, just wanted to bring that out. Absalom did what Reuben did, right? Which further strengthens the law as far as how the Most High said, if you go into her, she becomes your wife. So these concubines became David's wives. And to humiliate, excuse me, I'm getting tired tongue. To trying to get it out. Let me get it out. To humiliate him, he decided to, with the advice of Ahilion, to go in unto David's concubines, which we know which is unlawful. Okay, so when you start dealing with concubines, and I know it's a topic that most women don't want to hear, and even most men, because because if you really look at it, during our time, our generation, for us to have concubines, you got to be on top of your game because it's just like having second wives. You know, he said their root, their food, their raiment, their shelter, you shall provide. We barely providing for ourselves at this point in time right now. But for those who have it in them, and those who have it and understand the law, based upon no one else's judgment, you no one else's judgment. You're gonna have a lot of judgment come behind either concubines or second wives, and people are gonna frown at it. But it's in the law, and it's a law that you can stand for it during your judgment, where the Most High will not say that you are in sin, and that's the key. The key for us to live this life not in sin. This is the reason these laws are given to the children of Israel. So I'm gonna leave you with that, Israel. And I have two topics I'm gonna write down out of here that I'm gonna go into and just bring them forth in another episode of Torah Tuesday. And once again, check out the archives. Check out the archives of Messengers of the Covenant, and then look for those particular ones that I have in there. And I definitely have one in there dealing with um, moralities within the children of Israel based upon the laws. So, with that, Israel, I say shalom